Hello again, everybody. I'm Roger Hoover. Glad to welcome you back to the Crimson Tide Sports Network Facebook page, and welcome to this Thursday edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. Check them out online at TuscaloosaToyota.com. All about people, or all about you. We certainly thank our friends at Tuscaloosa Toyota for providing us with the show today as we are talking Crimson Tide football. Alabama's played 8 games so far this season. We'll take a look back at those 8 games, plus a look at what's ahead for the Crimson Tide in 2021. As we start the show today, we'll go through our headlines on the smart board that's provided to us by our friends at RJ Young. RJ Young is the official technology solutions provider of Crimson Drive. First of all, coming up on the show today, we'll hear from the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban, as he met with the media only once this week. That was on the SEC teleconference yesterday. So we'll hear from Coach Saban about some key players on Alabama's team, plus where things stand for the Crimson Tide. And then we'll get a really detailed look at what Alabama football has done so far this season, still what they can do, as we'll be joined by former Crimson Tide linebacker Cory Reamer, who is, of course, one of the co-hosts of Crimson Tide Rewind, along with Eli Gold, on Mondays at Baumhauer's Victory Grill in Vestavia. We haven't had Cory on the show just yet, so we wanted to make sure we had him on to talk some Crimson Tide football, so that's coming up after we have a look at Coach's Checklist. Taking a look at some headlines with this Crimson Tide football team. Again, this Saturday, an open date. As Coach Saban has talked about, really 3 key things you want to do during an open week. First of all, you want to rest and recover some players who have gone through all 8 games to this point and played a lot of football. Second thing you want to do is also make sure some younger players who maybe haven't gotten on the field as much get a lot of practice opportunities and a lot of key reps. And then the third thing, you kind of want to look ahead and see what some of the teams that are still left in your schedule or could potentially be on the schedule, see what they like to do and already go ahead and start practicing and start working on some of those game plans a little bit early. And then, of course, once Sunday gets here, it's game week like normal, getting ready for the LSU Tigers. Crimson Tide, again, 7-1 in the season, 4-1 in the SEC, back-to-back wins after the loss against Texas A&M, great victories against Mississippi State and Tennessee. We do know the LSU game is coming up on November 6th. We still don't know the kickoff time yet. RolledTide.com will have that information really as soon as all the games are over on Saturday, either Sunday or Monday. We should know for sure when Alabama will be playing against LSU, but there are 3 different options. So again, we'll have our radio coverage start 3 hours prior to kickoff, whenever that may be. Also coming up in a bit, as I mentioned just a moment ago, we will be joined by former Crimson Tide linebacker Cory Reamer to get his thoughts on the 2021 Alabama Crimson Tide. Some other headlines with Alabama basketball for a moment. Season's going to begin November 9th at Coleman Coliseum with a doubleheader. Women's basketball, first of all, 6 p.m. against Charleston Southern. Men's basketball coming up at 8 p.m., so we're certainly looking forward to having radio coverage for both of those games at Coleman Coliseum. And I mentioned that Brian Hodgson is coming up. He will be coming up, as it turns out, next week, as he's had a busy week on the road recruiting, but we look forward to getting a really detailed scouting report on the Crimson Tide men's basketball team from Coach Hodgson. And if you missed it from our Tuesday show, make sure you go back to our archives or also the Alabama Insider podcast. Listen back, watch back our interview with Christy Curry, the head coach of the women's basketball team, as she went through the entire roster, looked at the schedule, a really great breakdown of what's coming up for the women's basketball team. Finally, with some other headlines across Alabama athletics, make sure tonight you cheer on the Alabama Crimson Tide soccer team against Auburn in the senior night for the Crimson Tide, final home match of the year, 7 o'clock. Alabama's been great at home so far this season. Would love to finish strong coming up tonight against the Auburn Tigers. Women's golf, they won the Ally at Old Waverly as Benedetta Moresco kept getting low scores day in, day out. Started with a 63 on the first day, 65 the second day. Alabama had everybody in the top 5. Just a great performance, a great note to close the fall schedule on for Mick Potter's women's golf team. Cross country, Mercy Chellingot is the 2021 Cross Country Scholar Athlete of the Year. She's already been a national champion, SEC champion before. Now she's able to add the Scholar Athlete of the Year honor to her resume. And last but not least, the softball team. We already saw great crowds of the Roadhouse for all the fall ball matches that Alabama was able to play. Now we know what the schedule will be coming up for Patrick Murphy's team coming up, Team 26, starting in 2022. Check that out at RolledTide.com. But on the show today, we will start with the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban, as he met with the media only once this week during the bye week. That was on the SEC Coaches Teleconference. And here are the highlights. Coach's Checklist from Wednesday with Coach Saban.
Well, I think we have several things that we want to try to accomplish. This week is players to rest and recover and get ready for the tail end of the season. Number 2, it's an opportunity to get more reps and develop some of the younger guys on the team and Number three, it gives us a little opportunity to look at some of the challenges that we have coming up down the road relative to who we have to play. So that's kind of what we're focused on. That's what we're trying to get done and continue to try to build, the kind of psychological disposition on the team to persevere and succeed, in the latter half of the season. He's done a good job. I think that coming back from a lot of injuries from a year ago, maybe got a little bit of a slow start because he couldn't practice all the time. And now he's healthier and more able to practice, which I think has helped his confidence and consistency and performance. And he's played really well the last two games. Yeah, JoJo's a young guy that very bright, very conscientious. He's got really good ability, really good route runner, very effective returner for us, and he's done an outstanding job. He's made some great punt returns, and we had penalties that he had nothing to do with that has affected some of his statistical information. But from what we expect from him as a coach, he's done an outstanding job.
Head coach of the Crimson Tide, Nick Saban, again meeting with the media yesterday on the SEC Coaches Teleconference. Now that we're getting back into game week starting next week, we'll once again have our regular Tuesday and Thursday coaches checklist looking at his press conferences from Monday and Wednesday as we get ready for Alabama against LSU. That's the 9th game of the season, but the Crimson Tide so far have played 8 games this year, and kind of like we did with Rashad Johnson earlier in the week, we wanted to really see where Alabama stands at this point of the season. An open date is a really good time to do that. And today we're joined by Cory Reamer, who teams up with Eli Gold on Monday nights for Crimson Tide Rewind here on the network. And it was great to welcome Cory to our show for the first time as he talks about Alabama football. 8 games in, still 4 games left to go in the regular season, and we hope a lot more here in 2021. Cory, how's everything going? Roll Tide.
Everything's going good. Roll Tide. Not the undefeated start that we wanted to this season so far, but still got everything to play for in front of us. So it's been a good year.
Let's talk about how you've seen this team kind of grow from week to week. Obviously, things got off to a really good start against Miami, but just what's your impression of how this team has improved throughout the year?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of question marks coming into the season with a number of different position groups, offensive line being one of them, a lot of young faces on the offensive side of the ball. That was obviously early on one of the big question marks, just every position group, receivers, new quarterback finally getting his first start, offensive line having some young guys and trying to really figure out what, the combination of who's going to play what positions with Dalcourt and Owens alternating between center and tackle. But it seems like as the season's progressed, they've kind of found a groove and are figuring each other out. I still think there's a lot that can be improved upon, and I think Coach Saban's hit on that a number of times. But after that Texas A&M loss, we came out and probably played one of our most complete games against Arkansas. And then last week against Tennessee really just wasn't the same type of intensity and execution that we really wanted to see, every single week. That's the thing that Coach Saban always harps on, is just executing at a high level, no matter who it is that we're playing against. And this team has done well in spots and has looked good at times and done enough to get a lot of good wins against tough opponents for sure. And we just want to see it from start to finish, which is, that's become the Alabama norm that we've grown accustomed to seeing, is coming out strong, getting points early, and kind of finishing off teams well before the fourth quarter. But this team overall, with the addition of Jamison Williams, he's been such a highlight for us this year in the receiving room. We continue to improve. And on the defensive side of the ball, had a lot of guys returning, a lot of experience, a lot of expectations for this team. Will Anderson, Eli and I talk about Will Anderson constantly on our Crimson Tide Rewind show on Monday nights. He's just a human highlight reel. He's one of the most disruptive players on the defensive side of the ball, and I think the defense continues to improve as well. We've played some good offenses and found a way to shut them down, and give up some big plays last week, and I think that was just more along the lines of some late play calls coming in and not being ready to play, but things that we can definitely clean up for this last stretch of a tough season.
And you mentioned some of the inconsistencies that Alabama has had throughout the year. Does that start in practice? Can players and coaches kind of get a feel for that? Coach Saban's kind of alluded to that something wasn't quite there the Texas A&M week on, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Is that something players notice as well?
Yeah, I mean, you can feel it. If you come out on Mondays, you're cleaning up mistakes that were made the week before. Then you start moving into the game plan. But not even as necessarily the game plan. It's just the little details that, drop balls or busted coverages. People are just not as focused as you have to be. And I believe Coach Saban, and he's always said this, is that what you do during the week translates to Saturdays. You want to have everything buttoned up well before Saturday going into the game. And you want to have a confidence of, if you're dropping balls or busting coverages or missing tackles throughout the week, people think like, oh, that doesn't matter. I'll turn the switch on Saturday. And there is no switch. Preparation has to take place during the week. And it's just one of those things that's tough to get, as young as this team seems to be, for them to understand we've got to get everything cleaned up and do the things the right way throughout the week, because it does transfer to a Saturday game. If you're not doing all the little things right throughout the week, it shows up on Saturday, whether you believe it or not. There's a lot of guys in high school and college that you always heard where they call themselves gamers, and that just doesn't work when you're playing against these high caliber, talented teams. Even SEC teams that might not be as good as and as talented as we are, they're still talented. They're still great football teams. And so you've got to be on your P's and Q's where you can go out there and play fast. I think that's the problem when you have mistakes throughout the week that you don't, that you mess up, or your concentration's not fully there. Well, you can't just turn it on. Like, it just doesn't happen that way. You've got to be focused and be ready to go. And it starts on Sunday film session and Monday practice every single week. And it's tough for these young guys to understand, because they haven't really had these environments that they're playing in. There's a lot of guys that are on this team who have not had to face the adversity that they've faced this year with crowd noise and road games and everything else. So I think that he's getting the message across, and we're finding ways to win ball games. But deep into this season, we've got to perform better than we have so far on Saturdays, in my opinion.
Coach Saban loves to say that, the Alabama offense is the Alabama offense or defense, regardless of who the coordinators are. But have you noticed any big changes through 8 games from Bill O'Brien taking over play calling duties, being the offensive coordinator, compared to what we saw the last few years with Coach Sarkisian?
Not really. I think Bill O'Brien has done a great job calling games. And I think where we've had shortcomings or missteps, or, people always have gotten asked this question a bunch about why didn't we run the ball in the goal line situation against Texas A&M. Well, it's easy to say that as sitting at home watching the game. But I was sitting there watching that series over, and really he was calling the game by what Texas A&M was giving us. They were loading guys in the box and saying, we're going to make you beat us with your arm. If we score on one of those passes, nobody's talking about it, but I think that the following weeks, Coach Saban had some input in making sure that we did run the ball, because Brian Robinson has been having a great year. And so when he's averaging 6 yards a clip, give him the ball for sure. But I think Bill O'Brien's done a phenomenal job of calling games. I don't think it's really going to change between who the coordinators are, defensive or offensive, the type of game plan that we have. They adjust to us, and they know what Coach Saban's philosophy is, what he likes to do, how he likes to manage a game. And I think that they're pretty consistent in that. The biggest issue I've seen is just that we've missed opportunities, whether it be drop balls, fumbles, turnovers, or stopping ourselves short with penalties. And I think that can then turn into people calling on the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator for their mistakes, but we're not executing at a high level like we have been in the past few years.
So if you were on defense playing, and of course you're a linebacker at Alabama, if you were playing against Bryce Young, what would frustrate you the most about him? We know he can run the football. We got to see that last week against Tennessee, but what would frustrate you the most about what he can do?
Yeah, it was great to see him take off with his feet. I know that he still doesn't want to be a runner. He's got the talent to do it, but even when he did take off and run, he still had his eyes downfield looking for somebody to get the ball to. So, yes, he is a running quarterback. He has the ability to do it, but he sees the field really well. That's the thing that I've noticed about him, is that he never takes his eyes off of looking for receivers that are going to come open. And I think that would probably be the most frustrating thing, is you think you've got good coverage in the back end. Everybody's bottled up. All of a sudden he's moving out of the pocket, making, extending plays with his feet. And then he's finding guys down the field for big chunk plays. And that's frustrating for a defense when you're holding your coverage for 5-6 seconds, hoping that your defensive line is going to get there to get a sack or get somebody on the ground or get the ball out quickly so that your coverage is reflected where you've got your guy covered up and it's an incomplete pass. But his ability to move and extend plays with his eyes downfield, and finding a guy that comes open, that works open late, it's probably would be the most frustrating thing, because you're playing your tail off 5-6 seconds. Like, you can't hold coverage forever. You can't keep a guy covered for more than that period of time. These receivers are just as athletic, and they're gonna find a way to get open, and Bryce can find them if he's got enough time to let them work. So that'd probably be the most, anytime a defensive guy's out there and the play just keeps going, and all of a sudden he just completes the ball, and you're like, man, what else can we do? We did our job, and he just found a way to find somebody open again.
Or what's made him one of the best players in the nation this year. Cory, looking at the defensive side of the ball and specifically the linebackers, just what's been your assessment of the play of Henry To'oTo'o, how he's fit into this defense, and also helping his teammates around him on that position group?
Yeah, it's amazing how fast he picked this defense up. I know that he played under Coach Pruitt at Tennessee. He kind of got a tutorial last year of what this defense, but even so, the playbook is extremely thick. There's a lot of plays that can be called. But what I've been impressed with is what's helped him understand and pick this defense up so quickly is he understands the concepts that we're trying to do on defense, which is hard for a lot of first-year players to understand. So that the calls might change, but he understands the concepts, and he's able to understand what his role is in this defense really quickly. The only person that I've ever known that's probably learned this defense as fast or faster is Rashad Johnson. I mean, the first year Coach Saban got there, Rashad knew the playbook in and out immediately, and it was just unreal how he was able to make calls, make adjustments in the secondary, and also being able to tell linebackers what their roles are and defensive linemen. He knew it really quickly, and Henry's kind of doing the same thing. You can see he's the play caller. What's been beneficial for Christian Harris has been it takes that role off of him, and he can go out there and be the athlete that he is, and he's played really well because he's not had to be the play caller, and Henry can handle it. It's a tough job. You're lining everybody up, you're making the calls for adjustments, and you're also having to go out there and play at an extremely high level. And Henry's done a phenomenal job. He flies to the ball. It's fun to watch him play because he's sideline to sideline. He's not the biggest guy, but he can move from sideline to sideline, but he can also play in between the tackles. For a guy his size to be able to do that, it's really impressive.
So Alabama's played 8 games, 7-1, still 4 games left to go in this regular season. Just kind of outside of those, regular football things you must do to win games, what's really most important for the Crimson Tide coming up over the next 4 weeks to try and get back to Atlanta?
Yeah, well, you don't want to look too far down the road. We've got some pretty tough games. The hard part, think, with is just a situation of all the teams that we still have left on our schedule. Can't get caught up in what is going on in each program. LSU coming up, they can't even field a team to practice today, and they're supposed to scrimmage tomorrow. They can't even field a scrimmage tomorrow. So there's all this, headline material that if you're a player, you're listening to, and you're like, do we even need to practice to get ready for this game? Because that's where you lose the focus during the week that Coach Saban keeps emphasizing is it doesn't matter who's on the other sideline. We've got to prepare to be at our best, not worry about who the other team is, because you saw LSU, what they did against Florida. As a depleted team with a lot of injuries, they were able to get a win. And LSU is still a very talented team. So disregarding all this noise that you hear from all these different programs, especially in that game. And then you turn around and we've got New Mexico State, Arkansas, and Auburn left. And Arkansas is a good football team. Sam Pittman has done a great job turning that program around. He's got these guys believing in their system, and they can beat anybody on any given Saturday. They had a tough game against Georgia, but they're still a good football team. And then Auburn, depending on what happens, this weekend against Ole Miss, big matchup, they still control their destiny. We have to be able to focus on what it is that we have not done well, clean all that up, and continue to practice and play with the intensity that we did against Mississippi State, because any of these teams that we have left can keep us from going to Atlanta. And then you turn around and you look at who's possibly going to be in Atlanta. We have got to improve in a lot of areas to really have a chance to win that ball game and get into the playoffs. But like I said earlier, we control, our future at this point still. This season is still very much intact. But for us to realize the goals that this team has set, there's still a lot of things that we've got to do every single week to improve.
Cory, before we let you go, of course, we're talking Alabama football, something you do every Monday night, Crimson Tide Rewind, 6 o'clock from Baumhower's in Vestavia with Eli. Just how much have you enjoyed that show, getting to work with Eli, talking Alabama football on Monday nights the last few years?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Eli's good at what he does. He brings a different energy to talking about football, and it's funny to watch all these people that show up for the show, and they're not there to see me. They're there to see Eli. He's just a national celebrity. Everybody knows him. It's fun to see, but it's been a lot of fun getting to know Eli and get to work with him. His perspective of the games might be different from mine from where he sits, and so he asks a lot of great questions that I might not have thought about from more of from a player's perspective, not exactly just the X's and O's of the game, but, what is it like going through the mindset of this situation as a player in the locker room at halftime, those types of things. And we've had a great time. It's been a lot of fun to do the show. I enjoy it. It keeps me involved with the program and lets me watch the game from a different viewpoint with a different set of glasses on. And it's been a lot of fun. I look forward to it every week.
We do as well. It's a lot of fun to listen to. Cory, just thank you so much for joining us today on Crimson Drive. I look forward to your next episode of Crimson Tide Rewind and hopefully some more wins for Alabama down the stretch. But thank you again, Roll Tide.
Hey, thanks, Roger. Roll Tide.
Cory Reamer does a great job on Crimson Tide Rewind with Eli Gold, looking back at every Alabama football game Mondays at 6 o'clock here, streaming live on our Facebook page, of course, all across the radio network. Really enjoy that show from Baumhower's Victory Grill in Vestavia Hills. And speaking of Eli, he's coming up tonight, 6:30, Hey Coach and the Nick Saban Show, as he'll be joined on the phone by Coach Saban. Also, be visiting with the rowing coach, Glenn Putre. Mick Potter, the women's golf coach, will be along as well. So plenty to get to tonight for Eli coming coming up at 6:30. We didn't do our normal Hey Coach preview with him this week, but we'll have that, of course, coming up next week as we get ready for Alabama against LSU. This is going to wrap up this Thursday edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. Certainly want to thank Cory Reamer for his time. Thanks as well to our Facebook Live producer, Ethan Carabin, for putting this show together. And thanks to all of you for watching. Certainly hope you enjoy this only open date of the football season. But next week, once we're back on Tuesday's edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota, we'll be gearing up for the rivalry matchup with the LSU Tigers. Certainly can't wait to see all of you then. Until then, this has been Roger Hoover saying have a happy Halloween, and thank you for watching Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. Roll Tide.